thank you for joining me today. First of all, it's thank you for your time. So basically, I'd like to introduce you. I'm going to give you a little introduction as to what you do and who you are. So Bob Tapscott is an author and researcher at the Blockchain Research Institute with branches in Toronto, Sao Paulo, Mumbai, and Zurich, although Bob himself is based in Canada. Bob has consulted on the intersection of strategy and emerging technologies to CEOs and CIOs for a variety of multinationals, including SAP, VMware, Citi, JP Morgan, Disney, Best Buy, and DirecTV, on topics including security, business intelligence, analytics, cloud computing, and social software. His nephew Alex is the author of the book of the worldwide smash, The Blockchain Revolution, which I have just in front of me here, which I'm currently reading. Go out and buy it. It's essential reading for anyone who wants to get involved in blockchain or the blockchain space. And it's av- available.
Absolutely. It was written by my brother and my nephew.
Fantastic, fantastic. So let's get into it. Can you talk us through your background a little and how you got into the blockchain space to begin with?
Sure, is that when I got out of university, I found myself working in technology. And before I knew what happened, I had a 6 week assignment in Brussels to build a banking system. And little did I know, it takes more than 6 weeks. I came back 3 years later, and that system became the predominant banking system within Citicorp. It was called Cosmos 2. That ended up being bought by Oracle and is now sold, I'm sure, after many modifications and enhancements, as FlexCube. So I've been the CIO of different banks in Canada, HSBC, Lloyd's, and others. I've worked in Wall Street. I've worked at Canary Wharf. And I was the chief designer and architect for the system that supplies the flight data, the instructions, the directions for Jeppesen, that supplies it to every airline in the world except British Airways and Swiss Air. So I have a long background in the context of technology. And blockchain is a combination of some very interesting technologies that came onto the scene a few years ago. And, as a first, Don phoned me and said, what did I think of a particular technology? When over the years, he is a speaker and he is a technologist. It typically was the other way around. And obviously, it's very intriguing and has the potential to disrupt and transform many different industries.
So, what are the primary objectives and aims of the Blockchain Research Institute?
The Blockchain Research Institute is funded by 80 different major corporations, from SAP to Microsoft, a lot of consulting companies, such as Capgemini, Accenture, and others. Manufacturing companies such as Fujitsu, Tata in India. It's basically 80 Fortune 500 companies that are funding research in terms of what the potential for blockchain is in terms of transforming their and other industries.
Sure. Okay. Uh, Pulling up questions.
I
Sorry.
like I like to describe it as the consulting company that consults the consulting companies on the blockchain.
Fantastic. Uh, do you think the book, The Blockchain Revolution, went some way into people understanding blockchain a lot better than they do now?
Do people understand it better than they did a few years ago?
Yeah, as a
Um,
cause of
I,
the book.
yeah, absolutely. I think that the book not only explains in simple terms what the technology is and what the potential impact can be, but I think Don and Alex have successfully turned it from a transformational technology into a social movement.
Fantastic. And why do you think that is?
Because it has the potential to disintermediate players who serve no other purpose other than intermediation. Um, is that there's been erosion in trust in terms of institutions over the last 20 years, erosion in trust in the context of governments, certainly of banks post the crisis of 2008. and many other institutions. It allows people to build ecosystems where the trust is based on mathematics as opposed to, say, the trust is based on bankers. And so, in that regard, in terms of potential disruption, in terms of lowering costs, in terms of making a more equitable world, it has huge potential.
What sort of challenges and needs do corporations and startups respectively have in terms of using blockchain technology?
Well, I mean, I think it takes a fair degree of out of the box thinking in terms of determining what the blockchain can do. Is that for a lot of people, what they want to do is take irrational processes that were put in place, some of which hundreds of years ago, for example, letters of credit, and see if they can do it much faster. In the insurance industry, you'll see that people want to take the crazy 20-step process that involves, actuators and adjustants and accountants and executives and brokers and sales agents and product agents in terms of putting together an insurance product and see how it can speed things up. But I think that if you open the covers and look at it closely and understand what the potential is, it has the potential to radically transform and disrupt existing, quote, trusted, end of quote, players, then speeding up what have been historical in the context of what technology can do today, irrational processes.
What do you think is the biggest misconception surrounding blockchain technology at the moment?
The biggest misconception, well, I think there are a couple of which. Okay, one of which is that there's something highly mysterious and difficult to understand about. And as technology goes, there's like 4 or 5 different components of it. And if you understand the components, you can understand what it is and what it does. Okay, that's one misperception. The second thing is that the blockchain is that although it is the basis of cryptocurrencies, that it only has application in the context of cryptocurrencies. It has the potential to do radical transformation with things other than tokens and other than cryptocurrencies.
Why do you think blockchain is needed at a time like this in this financial climate, or even this, socio-economic climate?
Well, we're at a terrible period in which I think the rich are getting richer, and that things such as artificial intelligence, McKinsey, for instance, believes it could unemploy up to 800 million people over the next 10 or 12 years. Is that there are a whole bunch of highly disruptive forces out there that have the potential to destabilize society as we know it. And I think what the blockchain can do is it can, for instance, through a cell phone, make low-cost banking available to everyone in the world, and it has the potential to level the playing field and make a much more egalitarian, equalitative world.
Where do you think we are right now in terms of the blockchain space? Do you still think it's early days? Is it enough to now say that we are entering the Web 3.0?
Well, I mean, Gartner has a great graph that you might refer to. We're getting through the period of wild expectations, and Gartner has it moving into a trough of disillusionment, but I wouldn't agree with that. I think that the original blockchain technology that underlies Bitcoin, although it has the potential to disintermediate from electricity consumption, depending on which continent you go to, it's either more than Northern Ireland or Iceland or some other country. Although it can disintermediate, it's heavily consumptive in terms of electricity as a function of the gold mining or mining component of it. And so to some people, it's a get-rich-quick scheme. And I think for some people it certainly was, but I think that we're maturing past that. The second big issue in the context of blockchain is that given the number of processors involved, given the latency, i.e. the time it takes for those computers to coordinate with each other, is that the throughput has been terrible. It's been, people say blockchain's got 7 transactions per second, Ethereum maybe 13. But in terms of producing industrial strength systems that are used by large populations, the original technologies, although they proved the concept, they weren't capable of doing anything on a very large scale. And I think you're seeing a whole bunch of new offerings that are coming out that are capable, are industrial strength, are scalable, and can start doing the kind of social transformation that many people have been dreaming about.
Let's go into the actual technology of the different blockchains that there are available. There's obviously one for cryptocurrencies. There's another that's for smart contracts, which is usually on the Ethereum blockchain, if I've got that correct. And there's one for kind of information use, I would say. Um, do you think that we're at the again early stages, and there'll be more blockchains available that get developed over time?
Well, right now there are about 1,000 of them out there, and I think that it's a high risk area in the context of I'm sure over 900%, over 900 of them are going to fail. Is that I think that you've got to look at those that either are very well capitalized and very well marketed, such as Ripple, um, or those that are supported by a broad sort of consensus and open systems group such as Interledger that are supported by a large system. Those are the ones that in the long view are going to succeed.
Okay. What are your views on smart contracts?
Well, the thing that people have to understand is that um, smart contracts aren't going to replace legal contracts. Is that um, if you take a look at, say a simple contract to do a report, is that it is difficult to say if the report, meets the standards in terms of the breadth and depth that it should be written in. However, in terms of very simple things, it has great power. So, for instance, let's take the insurance industry. Is that today, if you live in a flood zone, you can't get insurance. That's one thing. If you could, it would be very expensive. But when you take a look at what goes into an insurance company, only about 50% of the premiums that go in at the front end come out at the back end in terms of compensation for people that are affected. So you could see very simple insurance contracts. So, for instance, if the flood water rises to a particular level, it could trigger an event in terms of payment. So you may not be able to get the $1 million worth of insurance that you could through the traditional process. However, if 98% of the money in comes out to compensate victims, as opposed to the 50% overhead, it could be very attractive in the context of what it's doing. So, for instance, you could have an insurance product that takes into consideration, 10 potential hurricane flood areas in the United States. And if a hurricane hits one of them, then the money goes from the other 9 to those that are affected. And sure, it may not, pay the $500,000 in damage, but if you get $100,000 that will get you, through hotels and through the food and through the clothes and the other things that are necessary over that period of time, and enough repairs to get back into the house, it's far more cost efficient. And it can occur in areas that insurance companies go in. It could be transformational. So smart contracts can't replace contracts. Lawyers are threatened to a certain degree by artificial intelligence, but not by the blockchain, because by definition, for it to be coded, it's got to be very simple, very straightforward, and not complex. At least, for the next 5 or 10 years. As artificial intelligence advances, there's the potential for far more complex contracts. But with Ethereum today, they've got to be fairly simple and very straightforward.
Hmm. And what you just touched on there just now between the next 5 and 10 years in terms of AI, artificial intelligence, where can you see blockchain going in that time?
Well, a blockchain, it's ironic, blockchain drove um, the creation of massive banks of risk processors that happen to be the basis of the neural networks that drive artificial intelligence. So, indeed, they are related. Is that if you take a look at NVIDIA stock over the last 3 or 4 years, it's been a far smoother prediction of the growth of interest in cryptocurrencies than the actual price of the cryptocurrencies themselves. Is that so? Blockchain um, will be infrastructure, a trusted, immutable record of infrastructure that will be critical to many of the new products and services of the future. And AI will be the technology that, on top of it, that combined has the potential for radical disruption.
What advice would you have to startup businesses that are looking to implement blockchain technology in their business?
Well, it's sort of a catch-22. Is that often I'm at a conference and somebody says, "I've got this particular application. How does the blockchain fit into it?" And sometimes it doesn't. So you've got to be careful there. So there are things that it's very good for, and there are things that it just simply doesn't fit into. But the critical factor in terms of determining whether or not it's applicable is the level of trust inherent within the ecosystem and how much money you are paying, be it the bank, the broker, the insurance company, the whomever, in the context of paying for that trust. And so it offers the potential to give you trust in mathematics as opposed to trust in the intermediaries. And that's where I think it's going to have the greatest disruption.
Sure. Um, and to wrap this up, how do you see the? I may have asked this before, but I could edit it down. But it's just more about the future of blockchain in the future and beyond.
Sorry, what was the question again?
How do you see the future of blockchain in the long term? When I say long term, I mean the next 20 years or so.
I think you're going to see blockchain originally as the back end, the immutable ledger of what happened in the context of many systems. I think you're going to see it used as the basis of integrating many different players in the supply chain, um, be it in the traditional supply chain, the financial supply chain, the insurance supply chain, um, or many others. It's going to be originally a back end and an integration tool between different companies within an ecosystem. And I think, based on the adoption of standards, which is going to be one of the tricky parts, you're going to see it cross the divide of many different systems.
Okay. To wrap up, do you have any final thoughts that I may not have, or opinions that I may not have asked you about, but you'd like to share them?
Well, I think we're in for a very exciting time, is that people have described this as the fourth industrial revolution. And I think what is going to surprise people is how quickly it is going to occur. Is that in the context of artificial intelligence, there are car companies that are saying next year they're going to be producing cars without steering wheels, brakes, or accelerators. That'll be driven by computers per se. Is that the blockchain, I think, is going to be an visible part of many things that occur in terms of the Internet of Things. Is it's going to be a convergence of a variety of different technologies that is going to have a huge impact on many different industries. And the big question, of course, is, for instance, let's say that a computer system can do the job of a physician, a general physician, as well as, if not better than a general physician, for a couple of different reasons. One is that the computer could have read the paper that was published 5 minutes ago. And two, you're more likely to tell a computer about the zit on your end than you are another human being. So the question is in two parts. One is that the potential, what is it going to be used for? Is it going to be used to eliminate a lot of doctors and to cut costs and to create greater profitability? Or is it going to be used in such a way that everybody on the planet can get access to a physician? So there are some big questions here that I think I'll have to take a look at.
Well, thank you for your time, Bob, today. You imparted some wonderful and great advice to share about blockchain. And if people want to find you or get in touch, how should they reach out?
The easiest thing is bob at tapscott.com.